Hey everyone, this is Dave Dubeau with another episode of the Property Profits Real Estate Podcast. Today, zooming in all the way from Boston, Massachusetts, Willie Mandrell. How are you doing today, Willie?
Dave, I'm doing well. How are you?
Where's the Boston accent, man? What's going on?
I'm gonna hang out with Marty Walsh and park the car in Harvard Yard. You mean that accent?
That's what I'm expecting. That's what I'm hoping for.
No, I'm a Dorchester guy, but no, that's just it's a South Boston thing. Not all of us are from South Boston. Not all of us are from Charlestown. That's just I grew up in the burbs as well, so no, it doesn't stick to everyone.
Man, that's so interesting. I mean, I'm up here in Canada. We've got such a generic accent through most of the country. Nobody can usually tell where anybody else is from. And here you got different accents within the same city. Love it.
Right.
Okay, so anyhow, Willie is a very accomplished real estate entrepreneur. He's been in the real estate game for over 15 years. He's also a broker. But what's really interesting that we're going to be talking about here today is how Willie does triplex BRRRRs, for lack of a better term. So he takes, 3-unit buildings, buys them, undervalued, fixes them up, gets them optimized, gets them rented out, refinances, and keeps on trucking. So that's what we're going to be talking about here today primarily. So Willie, why don't you tell me, what do you like the most? What do you call this strategy, and what do you like the most about it?
Yeah, I mean it's the BRRRR strategy. The BRRRR strategy. We throw an extra, a B on the begin. And for Boston, it's the Boston BRRRR strategy, and it's also appropriate because it's really cold here in Boston, right? Probably like I said, you're in Canada, so
Yeah,
where I'm coming from. But
you're not getting any sympathy for me, brother.
Right, exactly. So, but no, I mean, I grew up here. I went to school here. I never really left home. I went to Northeastern University as well, so know the market really well. Speaking of the Boston accent, everything here is a triple decker. That's what we call them. We don't have a lot of space. We don't build out. We build up here, and they've done that for 100 years. So most of the real estate in Boston is 100-year-old 3-family, 100-year-old triple decker or triplex. And I just created my niche in that particular market. And I used to go out and buy rent ready properties, meaning that you go out and there's slight cosmetic rehabs here and there, but most of it, for the most part, it's ready to go, ready to move in, and that's great. We did the first four or five properties we bought just like that, and then it becomes difficult after that, because now as property values start to appreciate, I'm stuck with paying 25% down. That's difficult to do. Now you're saving up for multiple years, and as you're saving up, the price continues to appreciate, and you're just kind of constantly being outpaced by the market. So switched our strategy. I discovered the BRRRR strategy and decided to try my hand in the major renovation, just going out and gutting things down to the studs, really creating some value. And it's really worked for us. So now what we're doing, instead of chasing the market, trying to buy rent-ready stuff, we go and buy bad windows, bad roof is leaking, heating systems are bad, electrical needs to be updated. Obviously, the cosmetics are there. Typical model here in Boston is buy it 600,000. The model for me, buy it about 600, 650, put about $200,000 into it, and the ARV, or the after repair value, is somewhere around $1 million. So trying to create $150,000 to $200,000 right from the start. That way, when I go back to the bank, I'm using that with construction loans. I'm making that initial purchase with a construction loan and the rehab financing, and then going back to the bank, and they're basically saying you have $1 million asset, and you only owe roughly 600,000 on it. But I go out and pull another $200,000 back out, put that money back in my pocket. Now I owe $800,000 on an asset that's worth $1 million. They're comfortable with that loan to value spread, and we just do it over and over again.
Nice. Makes a lot of sense. So you're also a broker. You got a bunch of realtors working for you, but what do you find works best for finding these kind of properties? How are you shaking the tree, and are you waiting till they show up on the MLS, or are you actually proactively going out and looking for them?
No, I haven't bought a deal on the MLS in years. I mean, it's tough. I mean, most of what I'm doing is, I'm a broker myself, but it's not like the agents in my office are just the ones going out and finding deals. To tell you the truth, more often than not, it's agents outside of my office. And despite that fact that I'm a broker and have been for a decade now, every agent in the Boston area that knows me understands that I'm an investor first. And I'll tell each one of them, regardless of whether you're with my company or not, if you find a deal, come to me. I'm your buyer, and I'm not looking for co-broke or the commission on the other side. I want the property itself. I just told you that my model has a $200,000 equity spread on the other end. I'm not concerned, or I'm a lot less concerned with a $10,000 commission on a piece of property. Let that broker take that property, and that incentive to have the dual agency or both sides of the commission is enough incentive for even brokers at other agencies to continue to bring me a deal and look at me as a broker first, if that makes sense.
No, that completely makes sense. So, okay, so is that pretty much all that you're doing? Is waiting for these to come?
Yeah. So agents, and then good question. To answer your question, other investors, wholesalers, just getting out there and just telling anybody and everybody who will listen what it is I do, what I'm looking for. I tend to be I'm a very impatient person, and I've come to terms with that over the years. So for me to go directly to the seller sometimes it just doesn't work. I've done this 100 times where I sit down with the seller, and I'm just you have to have empathy, you have to have sympathy, and you have to have patience, and that's just not it's just not me. I'm go. It's funny because
that's exactly how it is, my friend. That's good.
Yeah, I'm go, and the person's sitting there and they're telling me about this sob story. And again, it sounds bad when I'm saying this, but the sob story about their financial troubles or whatever it is, and I'm kind of like, yeah, okay, but what do you want for the house? Or when can we close the deal? So even paying just a small premium, throwing a broker in there, or throwing a wholesale fee in there, or giving a piece away of the equity to somebody who brings me a deal, I find is a lot better for me, because what lands on my desk is a finished, ready contract that's ready to go versus an opportunity that I now need to milk for the next 18 months, if that makes sense.
No, that makes complete sense. That's smart.
You just got to know yourself. That's really it.
I'm just back in the day when I heard all those sob stories, and
yeah.
I'm with you.
Right.
Very cool. All right, so you're buying these, and what I love about your focus, Willie, is exactly what you want. You know exactly what neighborhoods you want. You've got your crews lined up, I'm sure. So once you get one of these, you know exactly what to do. And how quickly are you usually able to get these turned around?
The rehab process itself is not long. It's remember, there are 3 families, so essentially it's like flipping in each of the units. Typical building in Boston, 3 families, about 30. Let's call it 3,300 square feet. So it's like a 1,100 square foot single family stacked up on top of each other. Yeah. So we can typically do that in 3 to 4 months. And even if I gut it down, I mean, that's just still, it's not going to take me too much longer than that. The problem that we have in Boston is still working through the city, working through inspectional services. And that's where you get bogged down. A permit might take you, they say when you submit a permit, it's supposed to take you 30 days. It doesn't take you 30 days. They're going to come back to you on day 28 and tell you they're missing several things that you've never heard of before. And then it's going to extend for another 30 days. So the permitting process takes about a couple months. And then I would say another 3 to 4 months, depending on the extensity, the extensive nature of the renovation. And then another 2 months to lease up, assuming that the end of that renovation process is not in January, February, or March. Okay. We try everything we can to avoid ending a project. Beginning in March or beginning in February is great. You submit permits in January, you got the whole winter to sit around and wait for it. As soon as the spring hits, you're going and you're leasing up at an ideal time. It just really is unfortunate when you pull a deal in, let's call it September, and now you're trying to lease up a property in January or February in Boston. I imagine it's the same for you. It's not the easiest time for people to be moving. So
yeah, especially in the middle of a pandemic.
Exactly.
So what was I going to ask? Are you typically taking these properties over vacant, or do you have to deal with pre-existing tenancies? How does that work?
Typically vacant, and we'll this may sound crazy if you're not from Boston's a very high price market. Again, that model that I mentioned to you, I imagine is not the model for a lot of people. If you're not in New York, San Francisco, come up some of the high price markets.
But my friend, the average house price in Canada at the time of this house, single family home, is over $700,000.
Oh wow! So you know what I'm talking about then? Yeah. So that's yeah. So it's a 3 family is $1 million, and again, sometimes when you're if you're in a different part of the country, if you're in in the South or in the Midwest or something like that in the States, you can have a single family house at 100,000, 200,000. So these prices may seem ridiculous, and what I'm about to say may seem ridiculous, but to answer your question, ideally, I'd like to, obviously you'd like the building vacant. I want to go in there and I want to, it's very difficult for me. Let's say if there's a tenant on the second floor to rewire a building with someone living, you can't do it, right? I mean, you need soffits, you need to go up through closets, you need to go, in order for me to renovate that third floor, it's almost impossible for me to renovate that third floor with somebody living on the second floor. You just can't do it. So I do everything I can to make sure the building is delivered vacant. And then if we don't have it vacant, what we do is a lot of cash for keys. And cash for keys, people who are not familiar, is essentially just going back to the tenant and just buying them out and basically saying, we know you're on a lease, we know you're here. Ideally, what we're trying to do is renovate this building. And we're basically going to give you a check to pay for your moving expenses and everything else. Typically, that check here is somewhere between $5,000 and $10,000. So if you have a unit with a couple tenants, you might be shelling out $10,000 to $20,000 just to get people to move out, and that's before you even touch the building.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's good to know. Interesting stuff. Now, I understand the value build by doing this process, the BRRRR. What does it look as far as a cash flow point of view? So typically, if you can kind of walk us through it, these properties, are they 2 bedrooms? Are they 1 bedroom type units typically? What are they renting for before? What are they renting for after? What kind of cash flow are you seeing on these kind of properties?
Yeah, so Boston's a big college town. We have, Harvard is here, MIT is here, Northeastern, BU, BC. Our rental market is affected a lot by, and has been negatively affected a lot by, the schools. As soon as they closed up their doors and basically said no one goes on campus, our housing market in certain areas of the city dropped by 6, 7, 10%, depending on where you were. A lot of big landlords are very, heavy into student housing. My niche here is not student housing. Unfortunately, I have a couple of buildings that were very troubled or negatively affected by the Northeastern pulling their student population away from campus. But the majority of my rental portfolio is in Section 8 housing or subsidy vouchers, government subsidies. I would say 85% of our units are in that niche. And what we try to shoot for, we are very familiar with what the housing vouchers pay. And you look at the scale between 1 and 2s and 3s and 4s, and then you consider the wear and tear on your buildings when you get up to a 4-unit and 5-unit and stuff like that. And you just a lot more children, a lot more with children come pets, and pets come everything else. So we found that the ideal place for us is a small family, 3 or 4 people, and that's a 3-bedroom apartment. It also maximizes our rent. There's a huge leap between 2 and 3. There is not such a huge leap between 3 and 4, but there's also a huge leap in. What there is a huge leap in expenses and wear and tear on your building when you go from 3 to 4. So the sweet spot here for me is Section 8 housing units, somewhere around a 3-bedroom. And what we find is, as of today, our units are renting for, if I freshly renovate a building or a unit, put it on the market today, roughly $2,800 for that 3-bedroom. And the voucher is probably paying a good $2,500 of that. Tenant's probably paying another $3. In terms of cash flow, in a perfect world, so there's 2 answers to this. Perfect world, if you, I try to shoot for at least $700 a door or $2,100 a building, is ideally what I'm shooting for. The trouble that you have is after the refinance, after you pull your cash back out, that cash flow number tends to slip a little bit, and you probably see somewhere about $1,500 for the building or about $500 for door after that cash has been pulled back out. But in some instances, I leave my cash in. Some instances, I go and and use something with a partner, or If we have a significant amount of equity, we'll refi again, stretch the debt back out over 30 years just to reduce our mortgage payment, to increase our cash flow, and try to get somewhere around $2,000, $2,100 a building, if that answers your question.
Yeah, that's great. So when they're all renovated, you're renting them out. Is it about $2,200?
About that, yeah, about that. If everything is smooth and everything is looking good, we're probably putting about $2,000 in our pocket, roughly.
No, sorry, I meant the actual rental amount for a 3-bedroom is how much again?
Oh, $2,800.
$2,800. How much is it prior to the rental? So how much are you able to pump that up?
Prior to the rent? Oh, I mean, it all depends on how awful the building is. I mean, most of the stuff that I'm going into, you wouldn't be able to rent it as is. I'm not looking for something where, because but here's the other thing is I want to knock out a lot of the competition. If I was just going in and looking for cosmetic renovations, paint and carpet, as we call it, right? If you're going to go in there, you're going to paint some things, put new appliances and new cabinets, then my competition is high because most investors can do that. So what I go and look for is stuff that you wouldn't even be able to live in right
like a
now.
war zone type stuff.
That's exactly
So
right.
it's been vacant for a long time kind of thing?
Some of them been vacant for 7 years, 10 years.
Wow.
The first building I bought was vacant for 7 years. And it had, rodent infestation. The roof was leaking. There was all types of moisture problems. The heating systems were, we call them the snowman boilers. They're covered in asbestos. Those were real problems. And it's a situation where the investor the agent is unlikely to even put it on MLS because they know that the majority of the market is not going to be able to handle that. Those are deals that are traded off market. Most of the stuff I buy, people are never even, knew the address was available until I'm putting it back on the market as a rental in most cases. So it's hard to tell. I mean, most times if we are buying things with occupied units, we are probably seeing, $1,000 increase per unit. So somewhere around, $1,800 is what the existing tenant is paying. We're trying to, get them to move on. Or in some situations, we've done straight, and this is a very rare situation, but we've done a couple of these where it's basically just been a straight paper flip, in the sense that the building was really in actually decent condition, but the landlord was someone who wasn't keeping pace with the rate of movement on the market, right? So I mean, his rents were all $14, $15, $16, but the benefit is that they were all subsidized rentals. And really the tenant, I mean, this is going to sound awful as well. The tenant doesn't really care that much when they're only paying 10% of their rent, right? So, I mean, we basically just did a paper flip, went back to the subsidies, and we think we bought the building at $900,000. And a year later, we had increased everybody's rent by, call it $600, $700, $800 a piece. The building appraised for $1.2 million. So it created, $300,000 in equity within a year just from understanding our market.
Awesome. Willie, time flies when we're having fun. If people want to find out more about you and what you're up to, where can they go?
YouTube is big for me. YouTube.com/W Mandrell. You can also Google Willie Mandrell. And if you're interested in learning a little bit more about real estate, just recently released a book called Cash Flow Secrets. That book is available on Amazon. So Google Willie Mandrell or just go to my YouTube channel /W Mandrell.
Awesome. Willie, it's been very nice to meet you, and thanks for sharing your experience.
Dave, I appreciate you having me on.
All right, everybody, take care. We'll see you on the next episode. Bye-bye. Well, hey there. Thanks for tuning into the Property Profits podcast. If you like this episode, that's great. Please go ahead and subscribe on iTunes. Give us a good review. That'd be awesome. I appreciate that. And if you're looking to attract investors and raise capital for your deals, then I'm going to invite you to get a complimentary copy of my newest book, right back there. There it is. The Money Partner Formula. You can get a PDF version at investorattractionbook.com. Again, investorattractionbook.com. Take care.